right, so let's get going. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Psychology of Learning. As I mentioned before, this is going to be your introduction to this course so that you know what to expect, what the timelines are, and just so that everybody's on the same page as we move through the semester. So what we'll cover today is a brief introduction. I'll introduce who I am. I see some familiar faces. Some of you have not been in my class before. So we'll talk about the name, some of my research projects, and the Stigma-Free Initiative. After that, we'll take a look at the course overview, what you can expect, course procedure, how we'd like to run things here, and then we'll hit up some syllabus highlights so that you're prepared for what's coming up in this semester. All right, so who am I? I'll start off with the name. So this is one of the more difficult aspects of this course. Like I said before, some of you have seen this before, so you're coming in here with that knowledge. Others might struggle a bit, so let's make it easy. We'll break it down piece by piece. It starts off, so it's Dr. Igor Yurichevich. So the last name starts off with a U, and then there's a reach, and then you open up and say, and then finally there's a Vich, and if there's any math specialists in here, that little gray triangle is what a Vich is. So it's U reach, Vich. So let's try that on 3. 1, 2, 3. It's not bad at all. All right. So this is going to be an important slide because in this course, you're probably going to have questions. You're probably going to need things to be clarified, or if you have anything that you need during the lectures, feel free to refer to this slide. Hand up, Dr. Yurichevich, can you go over negative reinforcement one more time? Dr. Yurichevich, can you give me another example of observational learning? Or if you just have anything to add, to the class. Dr. Yurichevich, I saw this person post this on Twitter, and then they got, tons of negative reaction. Is that an example of positive punishment? Anything that you might want to bring to the class, feel free. Raise your hand, refer to the slide, Dr. Yurichevich. There's time built in to each class to have those kinds of either questions or comments, so feel free to do it throughout the course. In terms of the research that I do, the work that I do, most of my research these days is in visual language. So that's what my lab is currently committed to. And what a visual language is we have verbal language, we have written language, but we also have a visual language, a system of symbols and techniques and information that is communicated through pictures. And this is actually an aspect of psychology that is becoming much, much more important in these years, as much of our communications are becoming very visual. So whether it be through social media or streaming services, a lot of our interaction with the world is now becoming visual, and we're looking at how do we understand this visual information. So a lot of my research has to do with one aspect of art that uses visual information to communicate a lot of content. So a lot of my work focuses on comic book art. And what my lab does is we'll look for features of this visual language, basically trying to understand the grammar of a visual language so that we can understand how our mind decodes and understands the information that an artist is trying to communicate. So to give you an example, we have here 2 separate pictures by 2 different artists. And yet you can see that there are certain structures to these that are the same. There's a certain visual grammar that is communicating certain information. So for example, in both these cases, the villain is drawn as an extremely large figure. Neither of these villains are gigantic, right? They're not actually literally gigantic. But the artist is using this information, using this metaphor of gigantic size to indicate that these villains are dangerous, they're powerful, they're a threat to the hero, they're basically very important to the story. So all of that information is communicated using this aspect of visual language. Another piece of visual grammar that is included in these pictures has to do with the positioning of the hero on the image. So in both cases, Daredevil and the Falcon, they're both off to the side. It could have been very easy for the artist to center these heroes on the page, but the artist said, no, I'm going to put it off to the side because I want to introduce that metaphor of asymmetry. And asymmetry is something that makes us feel something is other than us. Something is very different than us. So if you look at your own body, most of us have symmetry, right? We got a right arm, we got a left arm. We got a right eye, we got a left eye. We're symmetrical around that center axis. Anything that's asymmetrical is usually gives us feelings that, okay, these people are somehow different from us. This is a situation that is somehow alien to us. So that's what they did here, both with Daredevil and the Falcon. They put them off to the side to communicate that idea that while they might be human, there's, again, something special about these particular characters. Other work that I've done on visual language had to do with how do you communicate motion, especially in images where nothing is moving. So we took a look at how artists use literal information, such as the positioning of arms and the positioning of legs, to indicate that somebody is running. But then importantly, how do they combine that with metaphorical information? So for example, these action lines, they're metaphorical. They're not actually something that happens when a person runs. So how does your mind take that literal information, take that metaphorical information, and combine the two? How does it weight the different aspects of that information? And that was something that actually led to a publication with a former IUSB student. She's graduating now. And this was printed up, published in the Comics Grid Journal of Comics Scholarship. And then a follow-up experiment or study was published in the Journal of Graphic Novels and Comics just last year. All right, other projects that are coming out of my lab. We just right now are working on a project that we're going to be presenting in about a week and a half at a conference up in Toronto, me and a former IUSB graduate as well. And what we did is we took a look at another pictorial technique, another piece of information, which is gigantic size. And gigantic size is a very interesting type of technique because it can be used metaphorically. So this is an example of gigantic size being used metaphorically. So this is Mockingbird. She is not a 50-foot woman. She is a regular-sized person. But the artist here is saying, you know, I'm going to use this gigantic size, but I'm going to use it metaphorically. So I'm using this to show you that she's important, that she's powerful, that she's central to the story, right? These are all things that they're communicating using that visual language with the understanding that she is not literally a giant. It's just being used as a metaphor. On the other hand, gigantic size is often used literally. So this is an example of gigantic size, but this time Galactus literally is a giant. He literally is a skyscraper tall, you know, entity in that Marvel universe. So we did a study on how does an artist communicate that something is to be taken metaphorically versus something is to be taken literally. So how do we know when we look at this that we are looking at, oh, this is a giant, literal giant, versus, oh, this is metaphorically a giant. She's actually a regular-sized person. So we did a study on that, found the pieces of information that are most important to making that determination, and that was published in the International Journal of Comic Art, where, again, we found that information that allows us to understand when something is being used metaphorically the same way that we do when we talk. So when somebody says, you know, oh, John has a heart of stone, you understand that that does not mean literally that this poor man has a heart that does not, you know, is made out of granite. You understand that he's cold, he's emotionless. It's a metaphor. All right, one last insight into my lab. Again, with visual language, metaphors are used to communicate just as they are in written and spoken language. So one metaphor that everybody's aware of is the light bulb above the head. So when you see this, you understand that this person just had a great idea. It's not literally that a light bulb appeared above their head, They've just had this wonderful idea. And this is a metaphor that everybody knows. And this is a metaphor that everybody uses. But how did it get there? How does a metaphor go from an artist just saying, I like the way this looks, I'm going to try to use this metaphorically, to it becoming incorporated into the language, the visual language that we use? So I did a study not on the light bulb metaphor, but on a metaphor that I identified called Closeup Eye Asymmetry. So Closeup Eye Asymmetry is a pictorial technique where you take a close-up of a person's face and then you draw asymmetry specifically around the eye area. So this is something that communicates the idea of otherness. This is something that communicates the idea of, this person is alien to you. So while they're accessible, they're still, a little bit different. And you can see it here in Storm, where, she's only got lightning coming out of one eye. She's got lightning in her whole body, but she's only got it coming out of one eye when this artist drew it. Same thing for Magneto over here. Same thing in the Harbinger series. All these asymmetry noticed specifically on the eye. It can also be done through shading or composition. So here for the Rocketeer, we have one side that is shaded darkly. Here for the Joker, he's holding a camera up only on the one side. You can hold the camera up. If you guys remember what these things are, they're cameras. They're like a cell phone, but with no data. Anyways, you can hold it up to the side or you can hold it up, straight across. The artist made a decision for the eye asymmetry. Same thing here with the skull. That skull could have been anywhere on this picture. The artist said, no, I'm going to put it asymmetrical, and specifically, I'm going to cover that eye. And then you also have it in more abstract compositions. So again, asymmetry on the eye, asymmetry on the eye, asymmetry on the eye. So this was a metaphor that I saw over and over and over and over again. And just give you a recent example, it's also used in movie adaptations. So if you saw Deadpool 2, you'll know Cable here. And he actually has the rare double asymmetry. So he's got scars on one eye, a light up eye in the other one. But again, this close-up eye asymmetry. And I was able to trace it to a crystallizing event. And what a crystallizing event is, in artistic development, when you are typically around 9 to 12 years of age, if you are a developing artist, you are very sensitive at that time to influences. So that is the time where you're going to see something and you're going to be thinking to yourself, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, I want my art to look like this. Or, this is amazing. Oh my goodness, it's giving me so many ideas. And they're known as these crystallizing experiences in an artist's life. So I was actually able to trace this eye asymmetry back to a crystallizing experience that came from David Bowie from his 1974 album, Aladdin Sane. So this wasn't the first time that close-up eye asymmetry was used. However, this particular image, if you were 9 to 12 years old during the 1970s, right, back in 1974, if you're somewhere between 9 and 12 years old, this album was very influential. This was that crystallizing experience. And the way that one of the pieces of evidence for this is that when these 9 and 12-year-olds were in their 30s, in the 90s, that was when close-up eye asymmetry exploded in its use. So all of a sudden in the 90s, everybody had a scar on one eye, or everybody had light only coming out of one eye, and all these covers were being made. That's when it kind of exploded in its use. So it's not the first time that anybody's ever covered one eye, but this was the event that led to this being incorporated into our visual language. So that was one of my more recent publications, again, back in the Comics Grid Journal of Comic Scholarship. And to my knowledge, this is the only time this has ever been done. So a lot of researchers have looked to the first occurrence of a particular metaphor, but this is the first time it's actually been traced back to a single occurrence that influenced artists that you can then show started to use this metaphor, and you could actually see the spread of that particular metaphor. So this is actually going to be one of the studies that I present in about a week and a half at a conference up in Toronto. All right, so that's some of the research that I do. So I regularly post about my research and about my lab on Twitter and Instagram, @Aladdin Sane. So if you're interested in learning more about some of the things that I do, you can check me out on those channels there. And if you want to see some of the stuff that I do, maybe outside of the lab, sometimes with teaching and other things, you can check out the hashtag Comic Book of Scientist. And if you want to see some of the work that my students are doing, you can take a look for the hashtag Too Hard for Soft Science to see some of their previous work. All right, one last thing about me before we talk some more about the course. So the last thing I want to mention about who I am part of the Stigma-Free initiative. I joined up for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So as many of you probably know, there are a lot of stigmas attached to having a mental illness. And these stigmas, these negative ideas about having mental illnesses, cause these people to oftentimes be mistreated, be treated differently. And also it prevents them from getting the help that they need, right? They don't feel that they can be honest and open about their mental illness. So unlike somebody who breaks their arm and will not hide the fact that they broke their arm, if you're like, dude, did you break your arm? They'll be like, oh, no, this is totally fine. My arm is great. No, they'll be like, hey, I broke my arm. Let's go to the hospital. The stigma attached to mental illness oftentimes prevents people from doing that. So the Stigma-Free initiative is an initiative where they're asking people to basically talk open and honestly about having mental illnesses to kind of remove that stigma. So as part of that, I always let my students know that I battle with depression. It's a mental illness that I have. And, just want to be honest about it, get it out up there to kind of remove the stigma that is associated with depression and other mental illnesses. So just to kind of show you the impact that depression can have and also the light on the other side of the tunnel, I am doing better now. I'm still in recovery. Recovery is going to be a long process. But just to kind of give you an idea of how this all shook down, I started at IUSB back in fall 2010. I was diagnosed with depression in spring 2012, but that does not mean that is when I developed it. Because of the stigma that's attached to mental illnesses, I was living with depression for a long time, running around undiagnosed. And really, it wasn't until my wife told me to go get help that I finally said, all right, I got to do something about this. So diagnosed with depression in spring of 2012. I was on prescriptions, and I also was doing cognitive behavioral therapy, and I had my final prescription filled in spring of 2013. I wish I could say after that I was cured, I was done, hey, it's all over, but I'm still in the process of recovery, but it has gotten better, and I just want people to know that this is kind of like the dark side over here. I'll show you what happens at the end of the tunnel. So one of the ways that schools, universities measure the productivity of their professors is how much research do they publish? How much do they actually contribute to, in my case, psychology? How much do they take their work and let the world know about it, get it published? And while I was dealing with depression, I had the one publication back in 2012. And then on my road to recovery in 2016, early 2016, 2 publications. Later in 2016, a 3rd publication. 2017, 5 publications. So this is the light at the end of the tunnel. So I just want to kind of, be open and honest about this. Depression, mental illness, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the equivalent of having any other sort of ailment, like if you have a cold or if you broke your arm. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about that. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. So this is what can happen if you get treated. And the last thing I want to make sure everybody knows is that you cannot treat this on your own. So just like anybody who discovers that they have cancer is never going to be able to treat it by saying, you know what, I'm just going to get tough with my cancer and I'm going to man up and I'm just going to get rid of this cancer. Nobody's that crazy. But we are that crazy when we talk about mental illness. So many people are like, you know what, today I'm just going to get my stuff together and this is going to be the day I'm going to do it alone. So I'll let you know, you can't do it alone. It's impossible. It's a myth. I needed help. I needed to go talk to somebody. I needed support, from my team, and you will too. So if you know that you have depression, if you know that maybe one of your friends has depression or any other mental illness, go get help. You need help. You can't do this alone. There's no reason to suffer. There's no reason to spend a ton of time over here when you can make your way over here and be firing on all cylinders. So if you know you have a mental illness, go seek help. And if you suspect you have a mental illness, because again, I kept kidding myself. I'm not depressed. I'm just having a bad day. If you think you have a mental illness, or if you think a friend has a mental illness, encourage them to go to their doctor, talk to somebody, get a second opinion, and let's make sure that we're lifting the stigma off of this so that people can get the help that they need to get. All right, enough about me. Let's start talking about the course. Okay, so course overview. This course is going to be about the principles of learning. So this is going to be about the basic principles of learning. We're going to look at the fundamental, absolutely essential aspects of learning. It's going to be focused on theories of learning. We're going to start off with very essential, kind of instinctive, almost instinctive learning. And then we're going to get into the more complicated, higher order aspects of learning. So we're going to be taking a look at the entire gamut of learning. It's not a course on education, although it has huge implications for education. It's specifically about how do we learn, how does experience change our behavior in the future. So some learning objectives that we're going to be covering. You're going to learn how to correctly interpret behavior, some cumulative frequency output. You're going to be able to identify the US, the UR, the NS, the CS, the CS1, the CS2, and the CR in classical conditioning. Also the SD, the SDP, the S delta, the R, the SR, the SP in operant conditioning. That's the last time you're going to hear me name those by their acronyms, because that's a horrible practice to get into. But you don't know what any of these are right now. You will by the end of the course. Learning has a very specialized symbols and languages that they use. So you'll know what all of these are: unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, discriminatory stimulus for punishment. You'll know what they all are, and I will make a point of using the full names, so you will not hear me talking about the SDP and the S delta after this class. And I encourage you, when you're doing your readings, do not read this as SDP or S delta. Read this as the discriminative stimulus for punishment. Read this as the reinforcer. Read this as the unconditioned response. And that'll really go a long way towards helping you to understand what the information is that you're reading. We'll talk about the 4 basic contingencies, the 4 basic intermittent schedules, basically all the fundamentals that you'll need in learning to get a basic grasp, an essential grasp of the core concepts. And you're also going to learn, and we'll talk a bit about this in just a bit, how to implement most of the things that we're going to cover in Sniffy the virtual rat. So you're actually going to train a virtual rat to do a lot of the learning phenomenon that we're going to be discussing. All right, in terms of course procedure, all my courses have this. I like to run my courses like a research lab meeting. What that means is that all course content is open to ideas and discussion. So again, refer back to the slide, raise your hand. Dr. Yurichevich, can you go over that one more time? Dr. Yurichevich, again, I just read about this thing in the news. Is that an example of what you were just talking about? Is that an example of that learning phenomenon? So feel free to raise your hand. We have, again, built-in time in most classes where you can ask those questions. And I'm a firm believer that there are no bad questions or bad ideas. Everybody knows the phrase, there are no bad questions except the one that wasn't asked. However, there are wrong ideas, and you will have a lot of wrong ideas. So in my line of work, that's just par for the course. 95% of the things that I think will happen in my experiments don't actually happen, and that's fine. That's just how science works. So don't feel intimidated about asking for a correction. Don't be intimidated about putting out an idea. All of that's going to help you make sense of the psychology of learning. So let's make sure that we're going to have an open and welcoming environment. So if you want to contribute, absolutely feel free. All right, some syllabus highlights. Contacting Canvas. My office, straight down the hall at 2163. Office hours are going to be almost immediately, it'll be on the same days that we meet. So my first office hour at 1:30, my second office hour at 4. So I like to do that because the students are already on campus, so you don't have to have a second trip. There's the phone number for my office. Please don't use it. I still got the little red light blinking on my answering phone there. So horrible way to get in contact with me. However, I do use Canvas messages. I do try my best to check that every 24 hours. So if you do need to get in contact with me outside of class hours or office hours, use Canvas messengers. Do not use my IUSB email account. I check that like 2 times a week, so that is a bad idea. Much faster turnaround on Canvas messages, keeps it all nice and organized for us. So please use that for communications. And then speaking of Canvas, you're going to have a lot of resources for the course in Canvas. So for example, these lecture slides are available for download in Canvas, and I'll continually update information and content there as the course goes along. All right, any questions so far? All right, required text and resources, there they are. So we need Introduction to Learning and Behavior. I believe it was the 5th edition. That is bundled with Sniffy, the virtual rat. So this is going to be the textbook that we use. This is the program that will allow you to train that virtual rat. You do need both of them. And you do need the editions that are listed. Prior editions of the textbook, I'll be honest, they're pretty similar, but there have been some changes that have been made. So if you do end up choosing to use an earlier edition, just know that you might miss out on some information that could be on a quiz, could be on an exam. So just be aware of that if you choose to go down that route. And I believe Sniffy is the 3rd version, is the one that you need. Older versions, version 2.0 and the original version might work, but you will be submitting these data files to me through Canvas, and it's not guaranteed that my program will open Sniffy the virtual rat. So if you have version 3, then I'm guaranteed to be able to open your files. If you don't, then it might not work out. So I would highly recommend both correct editions of both of those required texts and resources. All right, performance evaluations. Where are your grades coming from? All right, so first off, there's going to be pre-tests, quizzes. So if you want to earn 16% towards your final grade, you're invited to complete 11 pre-tests. Those are going to be happening in class on the due dates listed, and I'll highlight those in the class schedule when we see that. They're going to be short fill-in-the-blank tests covering the assigned readings for the class. They're going to be the same fill-in-the-blank questions that you have throughout the chapter. So if anybody already has their textbook, you will see in any chapter at the end of each section, there are these quick quiz questions. They're fill-in-the-blank questions, so there might be 5 at the end of every section. Those are going to be where I get the questions for these quizzes. So as you read through the chapter, just answer those questions and then maybe review them before the class, because there'll literally be those questions copied, maybe like 10 questions in the quiz, but that's exactly where they come from. So it's not designed to be very extremely challenging. It's just designed to reward students and encourage you to read the chapter, work with it a little bit, and come to class prepared. And also, pre-tests have been shown to have wonderful learning outcomes beyond just the points that you'll get for the pre-test, but wonderful learning outcomes in terms of students' performance, especially on exams. All right, and the one thing that I want to highlight, last thing for the pretest, your pretest cannot be completed after the due dates. So they're going to be done in class. If you miss a pretest, you can't complete it at a later date. But I will be automatically dropping your three lowest pretest marks. So just in case there's a catastrophic failure, it's not going to impact your grade. You can drop your lowest 3. And there is, I'll mention a policy, if you can't make a particular class due to reasons that meet the criteria, we'll see what those are. I will also not include that quiz in your final grade. All right, exams. If you'd like to earn 44% towards your final grade, you're invited to complete 3 exams plus 1 final exam. So 4 exams in total. They're not cumulative, so there isn't like a big, huge final exam. However, you're going to see that some of the concepts that we're going to be learning kind of build towards later concepts. So it's not like you can forget everything that happened at the beginning of the course. But the exams are only going to be on the chapter specified. Specifically, that 1 final exam will not be a huge cumulative exam. It'll just be exam number 4. All right, makeup exams. If you miss the original exam date because of circumstances that are beyond your control and documented, you can write a makeup exam. So circumstances beyond your control, these are things that just kind of pop up sometimes. So things that have occurred to my students, you might be sick. Sometimes a student will be required to attend a team building exercise from their work. And lo and behold, it's on the same day as an exam. Sometimes daycare falls through because your child is sick. You're not allowed to send them to daycare, so you got to stay at home. I've had students whose, hopefully this won't happen, but they had a loved one in a hospital and they had to be there for them, so they couldn't make the exam. So these are the kind of circumstances oftentimes that will prevent a student from completing an exam. So you can write the makeup in those cases. So circumstances that are beyond your control, I'm very open to those circumstances. But one thing that I absolutely have to insist on is that they need to be documented. So if you need to miss an exam for whatever reason, make sure that you get documentation for the reason that you missed the exam. So if you're too sick to write the exam, at some point, go to the health center, go to your doctor, get yourself some documentation for missing that exam. If your boss is making you attend that team building exercise, forward the email that was sent so that I have that documentation. If your daycare cannot accommodate your child that day, get them to send me an email saying that the child was at home on that particular day. If you're with a loved one at the hospital, ask for a note that you can have. I'm very understanding in terms of the circumstances, but I must insist on that documentation. And then if you do want to write the makeup exam, there are the steps you need to take, the information, who you need to contact, and all that's in the syllabus, which you can currently download off of campus. All right, Sniffy the virtual rat. So if you want to earn 30% towards your final grade, you're invited to complete 15 assignments using Sniffy the virtual rat by the due dates that are listed. I love Sniffy the virtual rat because it is a way to get hands-on experience with the actual phenomenon that we're going to be learning. So not only are you going to learn about how animals and humans learn, you're actually going to be implementing that and seeing it in kind of real time with Sniffy the virtual rat. So I'll show you, there we go, what it kind of looks like. Whoops. So this is Sniffy the virtual rat. So it's a program where you can design different learning outcomes, you can set different learning parameters, and then you can actually see Sniffy, your rat, interact with their environment, learn different things. You're going to be teaching them how to bar press. You're going to be teaching them, different schedules of reinforcement. So it's a very nice, hands-on, interactive way to learn about these phenomena. Now, when I was an undergrad taking this course, we didn't have Sniffy the virtual rat where I was taking this course. I was lucky enough, or maybe unlucky enough, to be at a university that actually had an animal lab. So I went through this experience with a live rat. And sometimes I think, yeah, it'd be great if we had live rats. They got pros, you know, because you're actually dealing with another animal. You're actually dealing with a live, natural specimen. On the other hand, Sniffy will never urinate on you. Sniffy will never bite you. All things that happened to me during my time. So, you know, I weighed the pros and cons, and I think we'll go with Sniffy. But that's the program that we're going to be using. So for that, if you don't already have it, make sure that you get yourself a copy. And then make sure that you get it installed as soon as you can. So sometimes the installation, certain things don't work out. I'm not sure. Does anybody have a copy yet? Is it still on a CD-ROM? Okay. If you don't have, like most people don't, if you have a laptop and it does not have a CD-ROM drive, there is an external CD-ROM drive at the IT department just downstairs on the first floor that is available for students. Bring in your laptop, bring in the disk. They'll plug it in through a USB. You can install Sniffy right there. But definitely make sure that that's up and running, because we will be using Sniffy for 15 assignments, and you want to make sure that it's up and running. So one last thing about Sniffy before we go on, and I'll remind you about this when the assignments start coming up. You are going to have a manual that comes with your CD-ROM. It's going to give you some instructions about how to implement, you know, these different learning protocols. And they'll have titles like basic acquisition of a CR, the effect of partial reinforcement on extinction. That's going to be assigned to you as different exercises. Make sure that you do the exercise that matches the title and not the exercise that matches the number of the exercise. So I have a manual that is the full version of Sniffy. So I have like all 180 different, you know, things that Sniffy can do. You're going to have probably Sniffy version light, which comes with the basic ones that we're going to be using for this course. They're going to be named exactly the same, but my numbers might not be your numbers. So just bear that in mind, because I want to make sure that you're doing the correct Sniffy assignment. All right, and then one last little piece of the performance. So I passed around a sign-in sheet. Whereabouts is it right now? Does anybody have it? You got it? All right, I'll grab that. So if you haven't had a chance to sign in yet, please do so on the way out. We're going to be, you can earn 10% towards your final grade for attending the class meetings. So I've usually not done points for attendance, but it has, I have seen a trend that fewer and fewer students, as the semester goes by, you know, are attending the courses. So just to make sure that everybody's here, you know, just showing up honestly is like 50% of the way to success. Just being in the class, being here, getting your questions answered is so important. So I'm giving everybody an incentive for coming to class. So you're already on your way towards earning your 10%. So please attend all the class meetings and earn your points. And basically, it's just a great idea. So here's an extra 10% for doing what is going to lead you to success. All right, a few more stipulations for the performance stuff. Missed deadlines or classes. You can submit a Sniffy assignment up to 1 week late, and you'll be given there'll be a penalty of 32% off the final grade for that particular assignment. So please hand in your Sniffy assignments on time, get the full points. If you're late, you can still hand it in and earn 67% on that particular assignment. And again, if there's something outside of your control that occurs, again, if you're, you know, if you need to be in the hospital for a week or whatever, you know, that occurs, please let me know. Please get the documentation, and I'll waive those deadlines for you so that you won't be penalized on your final grade. But please hand in your Sniffy assignments on time. And if you don't hand it in within that week, or if you have a catastrophic failure on one of your Sniffy assignments, there is a final chance / redemption deadline for SNFI assignments where you will get a chance to redo that SNFI assignment if you either did not submit it, so you got a score of 0 on that assignment, or if you got a score, which I'm calling a catastrophic failure, less than 49%, right? So if everything just totally went wrong on the SNFI assignment, you can resubmit those assignments by the final chance redemption deadline, and I'll point that out in the course schedule, for up to a 50% credit. So definitely best to make sure that you do it correct the first time around, and I'll let you know exactly what I'm looking for in these SNFI assignments so that you're sure to do that. But just in case things go wrong or just it's not working out, you do have this final chance redemption deadline. After that deadline, though, I mean, it's called final chance. SNFI assignments will not be accepted. All right, any questions on the performance evaluations, things that you'll be doing? All right, so there's a grading breakdown in terms of the final grade. It's pretty standard. This is where your points will come from. Again, also kind of standard. So your 8 best pre-tests, again, I'll automatically drop your lowest 3. That's where 16%, class attendance 10%, SNFI assignments 15 of them, 30%, so 2% per assignment. The only thing that might be a little bit different that you haven't seen unless you've had one of my classes before is this idea of your best exam, second best, all the way down to your 4th best exam. I grade my exams on a sliding scale, and what that means is that your best exam, the ones you perform the best at, is going to be worth 18% of your final grade. Your next best exam is going to be worth 13%, followed by 9%, and then your 4th best exam is going to be worth only 4%. So I do this because I find oftentimes that students kind of have, some students have a challenge kind of getting going in the initial part of the semester, right? So there's going to be new concepts to learn. There's going to be new ideas that you're going to have to incorporate, into your mind. And some students are just off and running, right? So like next class, they'll be like, oh, I get it all. This is great. Like I understand everything. And other students, it takes a while for them to kind of build up. And then there's also situations during the semester where I know life gets hectic. I know sometimes you can't meet all your deadlines, and maybe you just didn't have enough time to study for exam 3. Maybe you had like 3 papers that were due, and then exam 3 is coming along, and you just didn't have the time to study. You have to make a judgment call. You got to budget your time, and you just didn't perform up to your standards. Whatever trips you up, your worst exam is only worth 4% of your final grade. So even if you get 50% on one of these exams, that's only 2% off of this 4%. That means that you can still get an A+ in this course. So it's on this sliding scale just in case these catastrophic failures occur. But again, your best exam, if you rock an exam, you get 100% on it. Congratulations, there's your 18%. And then I will automatically calculate this out for you in my final grade calculations, where I will do this automatically. So I don't even have to request it. You don't even have to say, hey, make this my best exam. I'll just do that for you in my calculations. So it's a forgiving system. But again, I like to do that just because, again, sometimes good students, will trip up occasionally. So this is built in. It's got that built-in forgiveness. On that note, though, Canvas cannot handle this. So Canvas can handle this. Canvas will automatically drop your lowest 3 quiz grades. But Canvas cannot handle this best exam, second best exam. So I will do that myself in an Excel sheet that I'm going to keep, on my computer. Canvas can't do that. So Canvas will, the automatic grade that it calculates, that will be your absolute minimum grade. Your actual grade, because of this, is going to be a little bit higher than what's on your Canvas grade. So bear that in mind when you're looking at how you're doing in the course. Your Canvas grade is your absolute minimum that you'll get in this particular course. All right, a few more things, and we'll be done with this first day. So electronic devices, you're invited to use your cell phones to record the lectures if you like. So feel free to have them out. I see a whole bunch of laptops and everything too. Feel free to use that. Put them on mute, I guess. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, feel free to use them to record the lectures. But the one rule I have for cell phones, please do not use them for communication in class. So I do understand that people have commitments outside of this class, and sometimes emergencies occur. Sometimes people need to get in touch with you. I know that a lot of my students who have children in school, sometimes they'll get that text message about something that is going down that they need to immediately respond to. And I'm completely understanding about that, but all I ask is that you just take it outside. So if you need to text somebody back and it can't wait, if you need to take a phone call and they just can't wait, don't even ask, don't even put up your hand, just grab your phone, step on outside, take care of your business, and just rejoin the class when you're done. No questions asked, don't worry about it. But please do not do that in class. So no communication with your cell phones in class. If you need to, step outside. Other than that, if you want to record the lectures or take photos of anything, I don't know, however you want to use your phone for learning, feel free. But during exams, no electronic devices of any kind, empty desks, and just Scantrons and exam booklets. All right, in terms of accommodations, check the syllabus for accommodations for religious observances, students with disabilities. If that affects you, let me know, and I'll make sure that you get the accommodations that you require. And then information on student responsibilities, what I expect of you in this course as a IUSB student, what to do during campus emergencies, and information on the sexual misconduct policy. Make sure you're familiar with those to ensure a good semester here. All right, a few more things, and then we'll take a look at the syllabus highlights. Accreditation. So this course that you're taking right now counts towards the IUABA certificate. They might have renamed it, but it's a concentration of 4 to 5 specific courses that have been selected that you can earn a certificate for. It's like a concentration in psychology, where you can basically have that on your resume, have that as part of your credentials to show potential grad students or potential employers that you have a specific knowledge and extra concentration in the psychology of learning. So this is one of the courses that counts towards that Indiana University certificate. However, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this does not count towards the National BACB, Behavioral Analyst Certification Board certification. So if you are interested in becoming a behavioral analyst, there are certain courses that you need to take. There's certain hours that you need to put in. There's a whole bunch of, kind of stuff that occurs. This course does not count for those because we just don't meet the criteria that they've set up. But it does count towards your IU certificate. So if you did not know about this, then don't worry about it. If you're interested in that IU ABA certificate, feel free to drop by an office hour and I'll just tell you more information about it. Or you can check out our psychology page. We should have information there as well. And this is one of the first courses that people take for that concentration. All right, so let's end today with a look at the class schedule. So just real quick, kind of show you the syllabus, hit some highlights, and then we will wrap up day number 1. So, all right, so this syllabus is again available on Canvas right now. You can download it today. So we've already gone over a lot of this information here. I want to get to the class schedule right there. All right, so the way that this class schedule works, for the times that we're meeting, I'll indicate which chapter of the book of the text we're going to be taking a look at. So the chapters are the chapters from the text that we're going to be covering on that day. Usually I expect you to have read the chapter prior to coming to class. The only time we're not going to do that is for chapter 1 introduction. It's next class, so it's a little bit kind of, I don't want to spring that on you. So for next class, if you can, it would be great if you want to read chapter 1 to come to class, but I'm not going to require it for that one. However, starting next week, we are going to have our first pretest. So in the first 10-ish minutes of class, I will hand out the pretest. It'll be those fill-in-the-blank questions, the exact same fill-in-the-blank questions that are in your textbook. not the ones at the end of the chapter, but the ones that are after each little section in the chapter. So once you open your textbook, you'll know what I mean by that. So that's where I'm going to take these questions. So I'll take about 10 of them. They're going to be the same ones. So as you read, it's a good idea to go through those questions, kind of solidify that knowledge, and then review those questions, and you'll be ready for your pretest. So we're doing the pretest on Chapter 2, and then during the class, we're going to go and take a look at Chapter 2. August 30th, we're going to have an online class. So I'm going to be in Toronto at that time at the conference that I was mentioning. I was thinking about what to do that class. You know, I didn't want to do the kind of typical, hey, let's watch a movie and you know, burn an hour and 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record the lecture. I'm going to post it up either on Canvas or some other method to get that lecture to you. And that's going to be our meeting for that day. So we're not going to meet here. I'm going to remind you 2 more times, just to make sure that, you know, on Thursday you can sleep in, super sleep in, I guess. But we're not going to meet here, but there will be a class. I will go over stuff, and you'll just watch that one online, and that'll be that for that day. And then all the other days, there'll be, again, on the schedule, the pretest, again, will occur when we start a new chapter. Exam number 1, you can see there on September 11. Again, the exam's not cumulative, and I'll give you some more information on those as we get a little bit closer. And then the other big thing here is you're going to have SNFI assignments due. So you can see here in the red, usually the red is going to be when things are due. So we're having a pretest that day, or you got SNFI assignments that are due. Notice the SNFI assignments, they're due at a particular time. They're due by midnight the day before. I used to have things due right when class began, but then I noticed that on those days, mysteriously, students weren't showing up because they were at home trying to finish their assignments. So it's due at midnight the day before, so just make a note of that. And then what I've done in this syllabus is I've also let you know when we're going to be covering the information that you're going to need in order to do those particular assignments. So up until September 18th, you're probably not going to know basic acquisition of a conditioned response, extinction, spontaneous recovery, what those are. But by the end of this class, we will cover those concepts, and I'll also go over what I expect from you from SNFI so that you're ready to do those. So this is just to kind of let you know in case you're like, oh, I wish I could start my SNFI assignment now, but I don't know what we're doing. This is when you're going to find out what we're doing, and this is when we're going to have those the class on those particular topics. And that's basically it. Pretests, SNFI assignments, and one more time, or a second time, it's going to be multiple times, just to let you know, SNFI exercise 4 means that this is the 4th SNFI exercise in this course, right? So you did SNFI exercise 1, you did SNFI exercise 2, you did SNFI exercise 3, then you're going to do SNFI exercise 4. SNFI exercise 4 for this class is magazine training. In your manual, if you flip to SNFI exercise 4, it might not be magazine training. So what you need to do is look for the title magazine training. That's going to be what it's called in your manual. It'll give you the steps. So that's what I mean by make sure that you're taking a look at the title of the assignments, because again, exercise 4 is just the 4th piece of SNFI homework that we're doing in this class, not necessarily the number 4 exercise in your manual. All right, and then that's it. Oh, one last little thing I'll mention. I keep saying this. This is the final thing. We got exam number 2 on October 4th. I have noticed that exam number 2, and I'm not sure exactly why, but it does kind of feature a little bit of a dip in performance from the students. Just historically, exam number 2 has been something that students have struggled with more than the other exams. So to try to figure out what's going on October 2nd, we're going to have an open student question and answer session. This is where you get to come in, and on anything about chapters 4, 5, and 6, you get to be like, can you explain this one more time? So an hour and 15 minutes of review, student-driven, where you bring in your questions so we can get everybody prepared for exam number 2. However, I am going to make that optional. So if you think you're ready to go for exam number 2, use that hour and 15 minutes any way that you like. But I did, just to give you a forewarning, I have noticed there's like a dip in performance for exam number 2. So I've made this optional section to try to, alleviate that and make sure that we get that taken care of. All right, and then that is it. So thank you so much for coming today. And next class, if you can, read chapter 1. If you can't, don't worry about it. Come to class. We're going to start up. And yeah, that's it. For anybody that might have come in late, please sign in here at the front. And thanks for coming by today.